So you can have a rod in this way, second one up that way, one in the centre and another 2 on the other side. So it easily takes 5 rods and it's nice and padded and protects your reels, protects your rods, keeps everything nice and separate. It's very lightweight. It's going to be ideal really for, well, for me, for the coming season. I'm fishing a big pit over at Burfield. I'll be doing a lot of moving. I don't want to end up with 2 rod bags. It's a 3 rod water, so I'll have 3 rods, a spod rod and a marker rod, and they'll all fit inside there with my net and all my bank sticks. Just go straight on top of the barrow. Ideal. It's not quite the early start I wanted, but as you can see it's quite thick fog out there, so I needed to wait until I could at least see the tree to cast to it. So I think it's about 6:15 in the morning. Still early enough to get a bite, so let's get it round now and get the baits in. I've seen 3 or 4 fish show in the same spot off the end here, and I put one bottom bait and one zig on them. Once again it's the zig that's gone. At the moment it doesn't feel like a very big fish at all. But it's a bite from a new swim. He's zipping about like a little one. He's a tiny one, absolutely tiny. He's not what we came to Yaley for. Bless him. Look at him. We'll just unhook him and ship him straight back. He wasn't the one that was jumping, that's for sure. There was a fish about upper 20, maybe low 30 jumping out there, and I catch that one. Pretty little one though. One for the future. Right, let's get him back out and hope for a much bigger one.
Hi, I'm Mark Coulson, editor of Total Carp magazine. Just popped down to Yateley Pads Lake to see how Dave Lane's getting on with the DVD filming. And while I'm here, I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking to you about a popular presentation, something that we get asked about all the time on the mag, and that's the chod rig. Now, the chod rig has only really become fashionable in the last couple of years, but I've seen versions of this used as long as sort of 10, 12 years ago. Essentially, it's the rig that you can cast anywhere. It's a bit like a solid PVA bag. Wherever you chuck one of these, within reason, it's going to present pretty well. So if you see a fish show, or if you're not quite sure of the nature of the lake bed, it's pretty safe to chuck one of these out, you know, and be relatively confident that you're presenting a bait. It's not going to tangle. It's almost impossible to tangle one of these. It will actually rotate as it flies through the air on the cast, and when it comes down, the lead hits the deck. The chod rig sits like that. You've got a buoyant bait which will always keep the hook link up, and it sits, you know, we've used this little bit of bark here just to demonstrate it, but on choddy bottoms, which is where the name came from, that rig is sat nice and effectively. It's never going to end up underneath the leader. I mean, it's pretty unlucky if it does. I don't think I've ever had it happen. And unlike lots of rigs, it's not going to get caught up in any detritus on the bottom. You imagine that that was much thicker, say it was thick silt or even weed. Now, I'm not condoning the use of rigs in kind of, you know, 4-6 foot weed, but if you've got a couple of foot of weed here, the key with the chod is, and again, this is a question that gets asked all the time, this top bead, which when the rig flies through the air, it comes to rest there, okay, that top bead, you can set that at whatever distance you want. So if you want that rig to settle nearer to your lead, then you'd have the bead somewhere like so. If the detritus on the bottom is a little bit deeper and you want to get that rig further away from the lead to be absolutely sure that it's still presented, you know, that's where it's going to end up, okay? It's up to you where you set that bead, but importantly, as with any rig of a helicopter nature, it's important that this bead can come off the leader safely in the event of a mainline breakage. Now on this lead core version, it's simply a case of a small piece of either shrink tubing or silicone with a tapered bore bead on it, and you can see how easily that comes off. So in the event that that line breaks and that rig comes under any pressure whatsoever, let's say it hooks a carp but there's no line there, that will just pop straight off and come straight off the end of that leader. Okay, but minimal pressure that was, but it's still secure enough to keep that rig in place on the cast. Important, and I've seen it, and it flies in the face of the rig and its mechanics, but it's important that you never attach any kind of PVA bag or stick or anything like that to a chod. It doesn't work, and if your bead does its job properly, that will just come off on the cast. If it doesn't, then that's not a safe rig and you just don't cast it out. So another variation of the chod rig, which has come into fashion in the last year or so, is what's known as the naked chod. Now basically it's exactly the same presentation. I've even used the same rig here, but instead of running on a lead core leader, this is just running on a fluorocarbon mainline. Now fluorocarbon sinks, it's invisible, and it's very much in keeping with the modern trend for slack lining. Now, one thing that you must remember if you're using the naked chod, you've still got the same setup with a boom and a bead at the bottom and then a bead at the top, which must be able to come off in the event of a breakage. But the thing to really remember is, particularly with modern pop-ups that are designed specifically for chod rig fishing, that's a very buoyant bait. Now, even with fluorocarbon, but definitely with mono, if you were to cast this out without any kind of counterbalance, there's potential for that to actually lift the main line up. Okay, now that isn't a presentation that is going to be particularly effective. So, small piece of tungsten rig putty. Now it's important that that's not bigger than you need. See too many people pile the tungsten putty on and basically you completely, if you like, it flies in the face of how you want the rig to settle. The idea of this is you want it to land nice and gently so that anything that it does stop against, it won't crash down into like light weed or silt or anything like that. So it's just going to land nice and slowly and sit as you want the rig to sit. Now the rig putty, as I say, you only need a small piece. Where you've got your ring swivel there, the putty, it's important that it goes above where the knot is there and this top part of the swivel. If you start coating this bottom part of the swivel here, the rig itself doesn't have the rotation and the freedom of movement that it needs. So, quite chilly this morning, so I'm just going to work the putty just to soften it a little. Press the swivel onto it, like so, and then it's just a matter of moulding it around, make sure the putty meets itself on the other side, otherwise it can come off. Now, it's quite a big chunk of putty that, so what I would do normally is test that in the edge. Drop it in the margin, just look to see how slowly that rig settles, and if it sinks too quickly, then I'm going to start taking some putty off it. And ideally, I just want that to land as softly as possible, but still make it to the bottom. Now it's important on that note that when that rig settles on the bottom like so, that putty, if it's correctly balanced, and the swivel should still sit upright. Too much putty and that swivel is going to land like so, okay? And it's going to actually sit down in the detritus. The ring has now been negated, that may as well not even be there, and that rig has no freedom of movement. So it's still going to work if the carp comes from this direction, but from this direction it hasn't got the freedom to swivel as it needs to. It's vital that that swivel and putty still sit in a position so that it's just proud of the lake bed. Get that wrong and you can turn an excellent rig into one that's no better than chucking out your usual pop-up. Okay, one of the things that you'll have noticed on the chod rig is that the hook bait is actually tied on using bait floss, as opposed to it being, say, pierced and having a hair pass through it. That's largely to protect the buoyancy of the bait. No matter how good your pop-ups are, as soon as you start piercing holes into them, there's going to be some water ingress, and over a period of time, that will affect the buoyancy. And the idea with the chod rig is you want the most buoyant bait possible to keep that rig nice and proud off the bottom. A quick tip when doing this, because it can be quite fiddly, is get your pop-up and just sit it in the small hole on a spool of hook link. But basically all that's going to do is keep it nice and still for you and allow you to have two hands free to actually tie it on. Now, you know, we'll have loads of experienced anglers looking at this saying, I don't need to do that. Well, that's fair enough. But if you do struggle, then that's a great way of keeping that hook bait nice and still. Take a length of bait floss, form a large loop, okay, and then within that large loop, form a smaller loop. Okay, it can be a little bit fiddly this, but you'll get there. The tag end that you've just created that small loop with gets passed twice through that smaller loop. So you're actually trapping the small loop against the large loop. A lot of loops going on here, but it does make sense. So now you've got that big loop and a smaller loop, which you're just going to draw that smaller one down by pulling on this tag end. So that gives you, in effect, a sliding loop, okay? Sit that over your pop-up, which is nicely held in place there, and just carefully draw it down. And obviously you want that to be as central on the bait as possible. Lots of people are scared about boilies coming off when they've been tied on. And if you do it properly and get that nice and central on the bait, there shouldn't be any problem whatsoever. Just tease that down nice and tight. Now you have to be a little bit careful, because if you're using a particularly soft pop-up, then you don't want to tear right through it, but I would suggest that the really soft pop-ups aren't going to be buoyant enough anyway. So a pop-up with a decent skin on it or a nice firm bait generally will be the most buoyant versions, and they're going to be, you know, better for the job in hand. It's then just a matter of taking your chod rig, and where your rig ring is sitting on the D rig, pass one of these tags through and literally just tie it off a few times, 2 or 3 times with a granny knot. Get a lighter, lob the ends very, very carefully so that you don't burn any of the hook link itself, and just get it nice and neat. And that's it, job done. Now, the one thing that sometimes scares people off using chods is that they can be fiddly to tie. I mean, with practice, and I've been using them for a long time, I still find them quite tricky, but you know, you can get there. Thankfully these days, plenty of companies make ready-tied versions which are probably as good as most of us could tie anyway, so I'd be more than happy using one of these. I tie my own, but I'd have every confidence using something like this. 1 or 2 companies actually do a short version and a long version of the same rig, tied with a stiff material, already curved, so you know, it's convenience in a packet. This here is the chod and zig wallet in the hardcore range from TF Gear. Now, open it up and straight away you can see you've got storage for everything you'll need for chod fishing and for zigs. The most obvious feature are these 6 rig holders here. Now, each of those will take, well, up to 6 rigs each. You can see how we've got a chod rig on there. You know, turn that disc round, you'll easily get another set on there. So, you know, up to 36 rigs stored in one place. But importantly, they're going to keep your zigs from tangling, and they're going to keep your chods with that nice little curve in, which is all important to that presentation. Inside we've got the elasticated hoops here for keeping all your rig tools nice and safe. A couple of pockets here, I've got some leaders in there, some ready tied leaders and some lead core leaders that I've done myself. Plenty of pockets here, lots of internal storage. you know, a bit of lead core, your stiff material for your chods, your zig material, hooks, all that sort of thing. You also get 4 flip top boxes for keeping vital components in. Nice and safe, everything's stored in one place. You literally can keep everything you need for zig and chod fishing all in one place, nicely protected, firm on the outside so nothing's going to get damaged in transit. Nice big chunky zips to keep everything safely stored. How much easier could it be? Right, Dave, short sessions. Sometimes you just want a quick shelter to pop up,
Yeah.
but you want something a little bit more cover than a brolly.
Yeah. Yep, this is a Force 8 rapid day shelter. As you can see, it weighs absolutely nothing. It's a lot lighter than the brolly and it's a lot easier to go up as well. And it's perfect for sort of, well, like today when I've just got a couple of rods and I'm moving around the lake and thinking it might tip it down any minute. Goes up in no time. And I'll show you. Just literally shake him out, lift him up. Pop that in, and that's him.
That's it, done.
It's that easy.
Wow. You could actually get a bed chair under there as well, couldn't you?
You could get a bed chair in there, yeah. I mean, you could do a night under it, it's not out of the question at all. But you'd also get a couple of low chairs in there. So if two of
so
you
you
go
make
fishing,
day fishing.
yeah, if
Perfect,
you're going out
yeah.
wandering around the lake and it tips down, two of you can get in there, get all your cooking gear in there for the, you know, tea making stuff for the day and whatever. It's also got a vent at the back that you can open for pole fishing.
Oh,
You know, a lot of the guys
okay,
sit there, don't they, on the
of course.
canals and that,
Yeah,
you know, and you can ship the pole through the back. But yeah, I mean, once it's pegged out, it's really sturdy as well.
So say it's a lot sturdier than a brolly, isn't it?
Oh,
And
yeah,
you've got that extra
definitely,
coverage
yeah.
on
Well,
the
you've
top
got the
as
4
well.
points on the ground, so like when you tighten it out and peg it out, obviously, you know, the brolly's going to wobble about, but that will sit nice and sturdy.
And it's just no chore carrying that around on your barrel or whatever, is it?
You got it really. Even
yeah.
if you haven't got a barrow, even if you are just like got rods and walking around, it weighs nothing and goes up and down so easily.
Cool.
Yeah, no, it's a nice bit of kit.
Nice cast, mate.
No, mate, what? Yeah, there's been a few showing right over the back.
I mean, you're quite keen to show me these rods, aren't you? And
Yeah.
that certainly looked effortless. So what are they?
Oh, it is.
Casting
Yeah,
tool, is it?
yeah. These are the new Intex. They are a casting rod. You know, they're still nice for playing fish on, obviously, but they cast really well. They've got a hell of a lot of power. They've got a very fast tip, fast recovery tip,
Right.
which is really important if you're distance fishing. You know, if you get the tip wobbles about, you lose accuracy, and you just don't get that final build up of power, that little sort of flick at the end, which these have got. They've got a lovely action, actually, beautiful rods. They're high modulus carbon. The top specs right throughout, really. They've got Fuji reel seats, the Japanese shrink wrap handle, and what we've done is we've built up the end underneath the
like
shrink wrap.
flared.
Yeah, so it's flared it, so you've got actually something to grip. You know, some of them are so thin, they're quite hard to grip onto, but you know, if you're giving it the big one, you want to be able to feel it. Like.
Yep.
And also, slide that back, I don't want to bring that in. We've got the new K-style guides.
Yeah, I noticed these.
Yeah, they're the
Quite
Fuji
different,
K
aren't they?
guides. They are very different. I'd say they're Fuji guides, and Fuji have developed them as anti-frap guides for long distance casting.
Right.
Because of the shape and the forward leaning in on the arms there.
okay.
You don't get coils. You can't get a coil catching around it like you
Right.
can with a more standard guide. So yeah, the coils, and what it does is it reduces the coils here, which obviously aids longer casting. So you get less
The quicker
friction.
that can take
Yeah,
it down,
yeah,
the
it
further
brings
it's
it
gonna
straight down without the chance of actually going around the guide.
Nice.
Um,
So is this the one you've actually developed this?
It is, yeah. I've been working on this for quite a while now, really. You know, started by getting the blank right, and then getting the guides right, and then obviously the aesthetics were sort of the final part of the puzzle, really.
And I know you've got plans to move on to a bigger water soon. haven't
I
you?
am,
To
yeah.
take
So
over
100
casting.
acres, just under 100 acres.
Nice.
Yeah, and quite a lot of it's out of bounds. So there's going to be quite a lot of situations where I'm going to have to be casting literally as far as I can into the out of bounds section. So you know, this is the perfect tool for the job,
That's,
really.
what's that, 3 1/4 test?
That's the 3 1/4, yeah. And this is the 40 mil butt ring, and on the 3 1/2, which is the most powerful one in the range, we've got a 50 mil butt ring.
Right.
And obviously the others have been adjusted accordingly. and everything below 3.5 has got the 40 mil.
And I know, am I right in thinking at the moment you buy 2 of these and you actually get the third one free of
Yeah,
charge?
yeah, you do,
Nice.
which is great, really.
Yeah.
You know, you've got an absolute top end rod, and most
just
people have a
helps to
set
bring
of
the
3.
price
Of course
down a
it
bit,
does,
doesn't
yeah,
it?
yeah. You get a top end rod and you buy a pair, and then you've got a set of 3.
Brilliant, nice.
Yeah.
I'll let you get on with it.
Yep, no problem. Cheers. Clamber up here and see if I can get a better view. I've moved up to the pad swim where there's been a lot of fish just under the surface. But the water's pretty murky. Oh Christ. Oh, I can see them all right. I can see at least 20 fish down there, all just sitting under the new pads. Oh, there's loads of them. Just sunbathing, doing absolutely nothing. Couldn't actually be more inactive if they tried. Yeah, I think they're just enjoying this little bit of sunshine. I mean, today's really the first proper warm day of the year, which is not ideal for fishing really. It was cold and foggy this morning and they looked a bit more active. They were topping, but since the sun's come out and it's warmed right up, they've just all hit the surface and they're just laying there sunbathing above those pads. Some good fish down there. They're all quite a good size, apart from one little tiny one, looks like the one I caught this morning. There's quite a few sort of 25 plus and a few look to be over 30 down there. But how I'll tempt one of them out of there, I don't know. Maybe wait till this evening when they hopefully move out a bit. But it is black with them down there. The odd one's moving about, zipping about a bit, but most of them are just laying there, gills going, pecks going, not moving. I'm just going to flick one down there in that gap. Oh, that moved him about a bit. I noticed from up the tree that I was fishing too far out with both the rods. Fish are right close in. That one I've just cast out, it's on a cut down boilie, and this one I've just got on a little bit of foam. I'm fishing them about a foot under the surface. I'd say the fish don't look like they're up for much really, but this is about all you can do. And you got to do something. See what that brings. So it is really scratching when it's like this. It passes a few hours till the old temperature drops down. And so I'm in a bit of a dilemma as to whether these fish are actually going to sort of, this morning they was all up that end, whether they're actually going to leave these pads later on and make it back up that end, or whether they're going to hang around here. Got half my kit up that end of the lake and a couple of rods and a net with me down there. Right, well I've just got back up to my original, well my new swim, my second swim at the far end. Those fish up there in the shallows, as it started to cool off, I could see them moving out the pads in big groups. So I decided to stick with my original plan, come around here and fish against that big fallen tree, and it'd only been in there a couple of minutes and I'm away. was in about 7 different minds as to what to do, whether to go up there, whether to come back here, and whether to zig fish or bottom fish, but looks like one of them minds picked the right plan. I had to give him some stick when he picked it up though, because it was only a couple of yards off the bush, but I just